Okay, today we're going to be talking about how to factor out the GCF, which is the greatest common factor, from a polynomial. And so we're going to start with just a binomial here. Again, it's a binomial because it has two terms. And we want to know what can we divide into each of these terms. And so I usually start by looking at the coefficients. I have 6 and 15. I know 6 does not go into 15, so I know I can't pull out a 6 from each one. So that means I need to pull out something smaller from each one. So if I go back and just kind of consider some factors of 6, I know 3 times 2 is 6, and I know that 15 also has a factor of 3. If I pull out a 3 from 15, I'm left with a 5. And so by just considering those factors, I can see my common factor is 3. And so I know that the 3 is something that I can pull out or divide out of each of these terms. So once I've considered the coefficients and what their common factors are, then I'll look at my variable terms. And so here I have x squared, which really the factors of x squared is just x times itself. And then I have x, which is really just x times 1. Okay? And so just looking at the x squareds, I know that I can divide out an x from each one. And so altogether, I have a common factor of 3x that can come out. This is the greatest common factor. So once you determine what the GCF is, then you can proceed to rewrite this polynomial, which is in standard form, into what we call factored form. So if we divided out the 3x, we want to know what's left. And so if you've written out the factors here, you can see that 2x is left. Okay? You can also double check and see that if you go back and multiply, 3 times 2 is going to give you that 6, and x times x gives you that x squared. Then to see what is left out of the 15x when we divide out 3x, we can see basically that we have a 5 and a 1, and of course 5 times 1 is just 5, so I'll just write 5 here. Okay, so again, 3x times 2x gave us the 6x squared, and 3x times 5 gave us 15x. And so now we have created what we call this polynomial in factored form. Okay, let's try another one. This time we're going to do let's do 20, move this up, we'll do 20x to the 4th plus 10x cubed minus 15x squared. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and see if you can begin determining what the GCF would be. Okay. Once you've returned to us, you may have noticed that 20, 10, and negative 15 all have 5 in common. So if we divide out 5 from 20, we're left with 4. Divide out a 5 from 10, we're left with 2. And divide out a 5 from negative 15, remember that negative goes with that term, we would be left with negative 3. Okay? And so we can see a common factor of 5, which is going to be part of our GCF. We now have to consider our x terms. Okay, so we have at least an x squared out of each of these. If you think of its factor tree, you can think of this as x times x times x times x, or you could have determined this as, you could have thought of this as x squared times x squared. That's another way you could represent the factors of x to the 4th. X cubed, you could write it out as x times x, or you consider it to be x squared times x. And lastly, you can think of x squared as x times x, or just x squared times 1. And so you can see that out of each set of factors, they do have a common factor, x squared. And so in addition to dividing out the 5, we can divide out an x squared. So again, that is our GCF, greatest common factor. And then to continue writing this in factored form, we need to write what is left after we divide out the 5x squared. So if you have your factor tree, you can see that there's a 4x squared left here, and there's a 2x here, so that would be plus 2x, and then there's a negative 3 and a 1 here. So these get multiplied. Negative 3 times 1 is just negative 3. Okay? You can always go back and check. 5x squared times 4x squared gives us that 20x squared, or 20x to the 4th. 5x squared times 2x gives us 10x cubed. And 5x squared times negative 3 gives us negative 15x squared. So we have now rewritten this, what we call standard form, as in a factored form. Okay? We'll go ahead and try one more, and then you guys can practice. All right, so for our next one, we're going to do 4a squared plus 24a minus 2. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can find the GCF. Okay, so upon returning from giving this a try on your own, you may have noticed that the only thing you can divide out is a 2. You cannot divide an a out because this term does not have an a. So here, this would have to be 2a squared in order to get back up to 4a squared. This would have to be 12a. 2 times 12a gets us back to this. And 2 times negative 1 gets us back to this. So that would be, 2 would be your GCF, and this overall form is known as your factored form. Go ahead and try some of the practice that is attached to this lesson.